1, 2, check. 1, 2, check.
Yeah, I'm with Dr. Karma Pulso.
So welcome everyone to the Explorers Club. We have a very special evening planned for you. And I'd like to say, first of all, Chirudelek, Kusup Zangpo, which means welcome and good evening to everyone in Bhutanese. I have a friend here this evening who called me up this afternoon. Fritz, do you want to come up here with me for a minute?
Yes, my dear.
Yes, turn around. Come. So Fritz, how long ago did you visit Bhutan for the first time?
Visited the first time in 1992.
And you were telling me that it's one of your favorite countries.
It is. We were 11, 4 women, 7 men. We just loved everything about the country. We loved the people, the friendliness, the fact that they learned English in school. I couldn't believe that.
And you did something very special there, right?
Well, we went up a mountain. We were told you can't climb mountains are holy. They were talking about Chomalari, which is a holy mountain and the highest mountain in Nepal. But about 3 mountains away from that was a mountain that had no name, had never been climbed. We had a guide from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he said, let's do the mountain because, I mean, there's nothing to prohibit us with a mountain with no name, has never been climbed. And we went up that mountain and we named it because it's on a path called Yale Path, Yale, and we called it Yale Peak. Of course, everybody in the United States calls it Yale. It's spelled Y-A-L-E, Yale Peak. And we went up that mountain and looked and saw all Yutsu Drake and Chering Kung and it's part of the Himalaya chain. So we were the first ones up that mountain.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think what you really wanted to say was that everybody should be visiting Bhutan.
They all should, and they all would love it, and I would fight anybody who says that I can't take the place.
Thank you so much for contacting us earlier. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the chapter chair of our Bhutan chapter. His name is Matt DeSantis. Unfortunately, he is in Bhutan right now, so he sent us a tape to introduce everyone for this evening. So here we go. Please play the tape from Matt.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt DeSantis, and I'm the founder and chair of the Explorers Club Bhutan chapter. We were established in 2019, and we're a collection of 18 members who support scientific study of Bhutan's natural, cultural, and spiritual heritage. Our members include everything from wildlife conservationists to aerospace engineers to spiritual masters in an effort to understand the importance of inner exploration when exploring the physical world. And today, we're honored to be hosting an event with the Explorers Club headquarters in New York, where we will journey to a heartland of Bhutan, where the intersection between the physical and spiritual world is very meaningful. There's a mountain range called the Black Mountains, and it's a range believed to be filled with spirits and has the ancestral bloodline of Bhutanese in Mompa village. And at the very northern head of this range in Trongsa peacefully sits a monastery named Rifel Hakam. And this monastery serves as a very symbolic location to hold today's discussion because of the relevance it has on the tiger, but both from a spiritual and physical sense. This range is believed to potentially be the last ecological corridor in the world for the tiger. And it's also, the monastery itself was blessed by Guru Rinpoche and Tashi Kidrin, who was the consort that eventually became the flying tigress that transported Guru to Tiger's Nest. And so I'm very pleased today to be welcoming two of our members, Tsewong Wongchuk, who is the executive director of the Bhutan Foundation. Tsewong has largely dedicated his career to protecting Bhutan's big cats, and Kedrupchen Rinpoche, who is the founder and president of the Kedrup Foundation and the spiritual leader of Rifel Hakam. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to just pass this over to you.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. It's wonderful to see so many faces in person after a long time. Alex, can we have the... Okay, so tonight we want to keep this very conversational, and we really want to transport you away to another land, another country. I think we need a lot of good stories in this world at this time. So basically tonight what we want to do is take you on a journey into the realm of, not just tigers as you think of them as the big cats, and that's globally threatened and endangered, and that you find in only a few countries, but also because we have Rinpoche here, who comes with an insight of a different kind, an exploration of the inner mind, right? So it's an exploration of a different kind, but we would like to bring this convergence of tigers and spirituality that exists in a place like Bhutan. So let me just take you back. How many of you know where Bhutan or what Bhutan is, or been to Bhutan? Quite a few. So I see a lot of old hands. That's always reassuring, on the one hand, but of course, on the other hand, I cannot get away with saying too many things off the, So anyway, so when we talk about tigers, let me, this is a Panthera IUCN map of tigers as we have right now. And these darker red shaded areas are where you have the tigers at the moment, right, extant, so they exist right now. But all these light pink, what used to be tiger range, and it's all gone from such, so many, much of its range globally. Not very long ago, it used to be 13 countries that had tigers, but already I think Vietnam and Cambodia lost tigers. So we have very little in Southeast Asia. We have some in Sumatra and in Indonesia, Thailand, a little bit maybe in Burma, but of course in India there's a big part where you have different parks and areas you have tigers. The Tarai Arc that includes Nepal and India, and of course Bhutan and northeastern India, going all the way across, which is probably the most contiguous tiger habitat right now. Of course, then you have the Russian Far East where you have the Siberian tigers, right? So it's a very small part of the world that you have tigers in the world. So I just wanted to give you that global context. And unfortunately, often conservation is driven by politics, by what you know, the current state of knowledge. So places like Bhutan do not get a lot of attention. When you think about tigers, you think of many other countries but Bhutan. But in Bhutan, we have tigers from the very low elevation, like 150 meters on the Indian border in the foothills, all the way up to, we would say, almost at the foot of glaciers at 4,500 meters above sea level. And that's a fact. Our tigers can traverse up and down these mountainous country, small as it may be. Our country is the size of Switzerland. But we have tigers growing from these lowlands all the way up without any barrier to movement because the forests are contiguous. So there are two things that Bhutan is known for, and we like to call it Bhutan's export to the world, is this one, some of you may have heard, the development philosophy of gross national happiness, which, again, basically, I think, His Majesty the King succinctly describes that as development with values, meaning that we should not aspire only for material development, but also the spiritual and the mental well-being of the people are equally important. So that philosophy is a good, I think, export that Bhutan is known for. The second is environmental stewardship. If you look at our track record, Bhutan is a small country, again, as I said, 38,000 square kilometers, the size of Switzerland, but squeezed in that small space is anything from tropical, lowland jungles, all the way up to the montane, the cool temperate forest, all the way up to glaciers and the high Himalayas. So when you talk about Bhutan, you think, oh, snow-capped mountains and monks and all that, which is true. We do have all of that. But we also have tigers and elephants in the south, and tigers in much of the country, but elephants in the south as well, and historically rhinos too on the Indian border, which is just making a comeback after absence of many years. So it's an interesting biologically rich area that have all these elements of temperate as well as the tropical realms. But as I said, the environmental stewardship goes back also in terms of intentional stewardship. So the country, E.O. Wilson, and I'm sure you would have heard half Earth, right? So he was talking about how if we can only preserve half of the Earth, of what exists, we can still manage to protect a great deal of biodiversity. Bhutan, since 1995, has already set aside 51% of our country as protected areas and wildlife sanctuaries and biological corridors. So there is a lot of intentional leadership, emanating from the kings down to the elected governments to the community members, all the way. I think there is a strong sense of environmental stewardship. So that is done. Second, the country is carbon negative right now. I think there are only 3 countries that at the moment can claim to be carbon negative. Bhutan was the first one to declare it at COP15 in Copenhagen. But now I think Suriname and Panama are also saying that they are carbon negative as well. So Bhutan is carbon negative. And we have a commitment to stay carbon neutral. And then the third one is that the constitution of Bhutan mandates that Bhutan maintain at least 60% of the country under forest cover at all times. And whereas at the moment, it's about something like 71% of the country still forested. So these are very good, I think, stories coming out of Bhutan. I think that the world should learn about and know more of. But let's go back to tigers. The tigers appear very strongly in Bhutanese folklore and belief systems, right? It's not just a biological top predator that lives up there. If the tiger is doing well, everything else underneath it does well as well, that we know. But it is also strongly embedded in local belief. This mountain range called Kanchenjunga, Great Tiger Mountain, for instance, up in the northern part of Bhutan, the people living around that area believe that the tigress makes a pilgrimage to these mountains every year, and then goes back. If the tigress goes back, it's a good year. It's a good harvest, a good year, free of sickness and all that. So there is this kind of belief that also strongly exists. You look at the architecture, the art, and many forms of social interaction as well. You will find the tiger in paintings, in spiritual motifs, symbolizing again, one of the quartet of power animals, together with the Garuda and the snow lion and the, what was the third one? Ta Singh, right? So you have the Ta is the tiger, Sing is the mountain, the snow lion, and then we have the Chung is the Garuda, and then Dru is the dragon. So among the four, it appears one of the four. You will see on the prayer flags and paintings and all that. You'll see that, and again, it appears in other traditional art forms. But finally, what is even more exciting is this deity that Rinpoche will talk more about, and this is where. So biologically, we have tigers. That their tigers are doing well. I'll come back to that, the actual existence of tigers and the tiger biology in a bit. But I'll pass it on to Rinpoche to then take us through his sort of interjection, bringing in a certain aspect that's very true and very important for Bhutan, and especially relevant for tigers.
Thank you. And Mr. Tseong is very kind of like spontaneous. That I am a little nervous, and I never get used to with public speaking still. I'm still trying to figure out every day, every time that I get to the stage, I'm still shaking inside, and I don't know what I'm speaking out, out another 5 minutes, I might not even make sense. Please. And maybe that's inspirations of the tiger's energy in me. Well, Chirudele, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. And the picture that we actually seeing in the right side is Guru Padmasambhava transforming into Dorje Drolo, the wrathful form, and the riding on the tiger, or let's say tigress. So in the left-hand side, we are talking about the Tashikiden or Monmo Tashikiden. We talk about Monmo Tashikiden. The Monmo, the name Monmo means a lady of the Mon. Or in ancient time, the Bhutan was known after Monyul. So Monmo Tashikiden, it's a very interesting story. So when Padmasambhava visited Bhutan before Padmasambhava visited Tibet. So many people come and ask us, hey, are you part of Tibetan Buddhism? How does it, is it kind of like something that comes from Tibet? And actually, yes, we can say, there is a relationship between the Buddhism in Bhutan and in Tibet. But, Buddhism in Bhutan was established before it was established in Tibet. So Padmasambhava traveled from Perfing, Nepal, first to Bhutan, and then he actually traveled to Tibet. And actually, later on, he actually visited Bhutan another several times from Tibet, actually. So when Padmasambhava first visited Bhutan, he actually made a relationship with the localities and began to actually explore the Dharma. And one of those, very important role that time, along with Padmasambhava, to actually generate, to kind of, explore the Buddhism in the country, the very important role was taken by his consort, Monmo Tashikiden, which is in the left side here. And especially, when you talk about Tashikiden was a daughter of actually a princess, of a local king called Sundaraja. And Tashikiden was the one actually who, there is someone else, for example, even if in the normal times, we need someone else to remind us, to know what is the most important thing about, and then what you need to do. And then Padmasambhava is someone else who is very busy. And Tashikeden was the one actually who requested Guru Padmasambhava to have a special teachings for Bhutanese, where actually, which is today deeply inherent in the country, in Bhutan, and then actually where the Bhutanese culture actually is originated from. So I call that Monmo Tashikeden is the founding mother of the Buddhism in Bhutan. That's one. So, and not only that, when Guru Padmasambhava actually subjugated around the Himalayan countries, subjugated the evil spirits and bound them by the oath to take care of the well-being of the sentient beings and protect the Dharma. So he has to trans into a different kind of forms where actually this Dorje Drolo is. And Tashikeden again volunteered herself to transform into a tigress and ride on, which actually Guru Rinpoche ride on it and actually flee to the tigerness, which actually today the tigerness becomes very important monument in the world. And Monmata Kitten was not just simply the one actually who transformed to the tigress. That's it. Not at all. She was a very successful practitioner as well. And we have few monuments that Tashikheden built and where she meditated on. Actually, which is very important, where today in the world, in 21st century, where everyone is talking about the gender equality and the women's empowerment, and feminine empowerment was there in that time only. And this place is one of those which actually I'm the head, let's say like monk of this monastery, and where actually which is one of the most important a place where actually local peoples comes and respects, and where actually this place is one of those which was built by Monmata Kitten as her meditation place. And this is one of one of the last piece that is left from 8th century, and this is 1,200 years old now. Yeah, and still living. Like when I talk about this monastery, I feel very actually happy. Like where the feminine empowerment was actually there. Where female kind of empowerment was already there from the 8th century itself in Bhutan, and then where we don't need to actually talk about that things, isn't it? But that's beautiful, isn't that? So, does it make sense? This is in the central Bhutan, Trongsa, and then facing the Black Mountain Range. Actually, those in the front mountains, these are called Black Mountain Ranges, where many actually tigers also are around that places. So Monmata Kitten is very, very important figure. And when you talk about the tiger in a country, we just simply don't think the tiger is an animal, all kind of very rare animal in the world. But also a local people think that Tashikheden is some sort of the tiger might be like an emanation of Monmata Kitten. So we interact with the tiger in the sense of respect. We never know. Monmata Kitten might have transformed right in front of you, to come there and bless you. Who knows, And so therefore, in Bhutan, the tiger is not just simply an animal. It represents a very important figure in the Buddhism itself, and also it actually it is venerated mostly as one of those animals that where humans deeply connect with them and respect them very much from the deep core of heart. Okay, so I will let Mr. Tsewang to continue.
Thank you, Rinpoche. So as you can see, of course, there's a lot more to all of these, right? And I don't pretend to even understand a little bit of it, because I think there's deeply spiritual sort of meanings in a lot of these. And as Rinpoche rightly pointed out, in many of our communities, we don't even call the tiger a tiger, right? You respectfully call it the big animal. I think in many villages, you call it the big animal, or either it has some familial, term, like maybe grandfather tiger, or So there's a lot of respect, also fear and awe, and so you talk in hush tones, saying, "Oh, the big animal has gone this way," So, but this is very true and very strong right now. It's very present. It is not something, again, that is a thing of the past, but a lot of people live in close proximity to these tigers. And as Rinpoche pointed out, the deity, this master, the bringing forth a fearless wisdom, or being part of this spirit of Buddhism, who converted herself or transformed herself into this tigress, and then carried the master and landed in a very famous, iconic monastery in Bhutan that I showed on the first. We have it on the first slide up on the cliff. It's called the Tiger's Nest Monastery. Anybody visiting Bhutan, would most likely visit that monastery, which is still going very strong. I mean, the ancient traditions of prayers and offerings and all that, it's not broken. I mean, it's still going on very strong as it was several hundred, if not 1,000 years ago. So Rinpoche's, monastery in central Bhutan, and in Bhutan, again, through repeated surveys, repeated camera traps, genetics, even radiotelemetry, we have a lot of information on the tigers now. our colleagues in the government, in the parks, working with tiger surveys, and they have been providing us with a lot of information, a lot of evidence that tigers are doing very well in Bhutan. And I think we need that kind of a story when you hear, it's all doom and gloom in many other parts of the world. We're losing lots of tigers, we're losing lots of many things. And then on top of that, we have climate change to contend with. But I think these stories need to come out, and I think more people need to come visit and learn more about Bhutan. And tigers, again, they're not just accidentally happening in these mountain areas. They're breeding and thriving, and we have ample evidence now of tigers with 3 cubs, or sometimes even 4 cubs. That's a clear indication that they're doing well. I mean, there's adequate prey, there's adequate space, less poaching, and all of that. These bode well for tigers. And it's also good that many other countries, like Nepal, for instance, even Thailand, I think the tigers of India, tigers are bounding back in some of these places, and that's good. But yet at the same time, and this is again, in one of the tiger surveys, this is not. One of my colleagues always jokes around and says, "This is not a Siberian tiger. This is in Bhutan." So it is a Bengal tiger, but you find it up in the mountains. And like I said, 4,500 meters. It's not surprising to find tigers that high. And that comes from, again, it's not by accident. There is a lot of deliberate action that went on behind in keeping these things, the habitat intact, keeping the protection level high, policies in place, and so forth. However, it's not all, not all fine and dandy. I think we also have issues, right? Oh, sorry. So when you do have tigers, roaming about, like in Rinpoche's monastery, near the area, we find now that tiger density is relatively high in some parts of Bhutan as opposed to some other parts. So like this area near Rinpoche's monastery, coincidentally, it so happens that spiritually you have this the female sort of a leader or Buddhist master that transformed herself into a tigress. But in the real world, we have high tiger density in that area. And I think this is such a wonderful coincidence, a convergence of this spirituality and also real-time biology as well. But this presents a very strong opportunity for conservation using, especially teachers and learned ones like Rinpoche and others who have a lot of respect of the local communities. And the fact that we have tigers like this also means that the people living around lose their livestock to tigers as well. So there is human-wildlife conflict in that sense. So people need to be somehow, their loss have to be alleviated, not necessarily compensated with money, but I think there are many skillful ways to bring benefits of conservation to these communities. And some of our programs, together with the Bhutan Tiger Center, we are targeting communities where you're going in, looking at other economic activities that can be supported, yet at the same time, people can then also, find a reason to be appreciative and supportive of tiger conservation. However, I must also say that the patience and the general ethos of a spiritual presence of all these spiritual teachings and all that within the communities is very strong. So even if we have a lot of predation and all that, people may face this economic burden, but it's not very common for Bhutanese farmers to kill a tiger or to get together and poison predators. I mean, that's not a very common thing. There's a high level of tolerance. But we feel like before that level of tolerance changes, it's important for the conservationists and others using the force of spirituality and others to try and bring benefits to the community so they remain supportive of conservation. So in essence, what we wanted to share with you is that a place like Bhutan, it truly presents this opportunity to look at conservation in a little different way. I mean, it's in real time. There are tigers and snow leopards and many other fascinating animals that still live freely. But at the same time, because of the strong prevalence of spirituality and the culture being maintained at a very high level, we feel there are even better stories that can come out of Bhutan in using all of these for a positive outcome. So that's all we wanted to share. But more importantly, I think Rinpoche and I would like to maybe open the floor for questions. I think that's always a good way to share more information, is to really answer to your questions rather than us keeping on talking and then yeah. So thank you.
We're gonna start over here. Thank you so much. Whoever has a question, we're going to have to do it into the microphone because people are watching from all over the world. In fact, we have people watching from Bhutan tonight, from Spain, from Brazil, clear across America, and all around the world. So, first question.
It isn't so much a question as a comment on the beauty, the calm, and the pleasant feeling one has when they enter Bhutan. Now that there's a brave new world out there and the Almond hotels, how do you maintain that calm and elegance you have had with your wonderful country?
Thank you for that wonderful comment. It is a challenge, but at the same time, I think we are stepping into the 21st century. There are things that modernization brings that are of benefit to the country. We cannot have a country in a museum, right? We cannot have a country that is stuck in time, not really taking advantage of what the modern age has to offer. Yet at the same time, I think the strongest the strength of Bhutan, I think, is its authenticity in the culture. It's not for tourists, or it's not just for tourists, or for a show, but this is just how people live. This is how people talk and dress, and the architecture, and all of this is authentic. This is all very authentic. Yes, challenges are there, I think, but the country is also gearing up to adopt many things that this century provides in terms of technology, in terms of modernization. But again, going back to what I had mentioned earlier about this development philosophy of gross national happiness, culture is one of them. Preservation of culture is one of them. But personally, I think culture should not be stuck in time. It should evolve, right? It should be pragmatic in the sense you maintain what is good of the past, yet at the same time, you cannot be stuck in a certain century, or everybody has to dress like this or that. Even our traditional dress have evolved over time. The pattern, the way people wear it, even in music. I think there's a lot of evolution that's happening. So we're not immune, definitely, but we are aware and cognizant of a lot of the ills that many outside influence also bring to Bhutan, like technology and the fact that it wastes a lot of time for our youth. You go down those rabbit holes, the TikTok and all that, we have that too. So I don't think we should pretend that Bhutan is immune or free of these ills. We definitely have that. But I think there is also a genuine effort, again, to try and make it in a sensible way. You adopt what is good for the country and you take it forward, or for the people, and take it forward. But I understand the challenges. Yeah. I don't know if Rinpoche want to add anything onto that.
I think that it's pretty kind of like beautiful ways that you explain. Thank you. I'm also learning, actually.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for being here this evening. I have a question for Rinpoche. If one of your populace is eaten by a tiger, do you consider it an honor or bad luck?
Okay. Of course, especially for those nomads, it might be a little bit difficult for them to really take it optimistically immediately, but obviously that's good luck. Yeah, that's actually, this is not my interpretation, but people actually consider themselves, when there is like tigers which usually visit nearby them, actually considers a good luck to have the kind of like tigers visit nearby. But it is always another prayer is that please they do not attract to the cattle. So maybe that's what is like that. Yeah.
But also to add to that, often there is this relegation to fate. I think there is the strong sense of relegating something to fate. And if something happens, maybe my guardian deities are not happy, and then you get over that. I think I've seen that. I've experienced this with friends who are herding yaks, or sometimes a snow leopard or maybe a black bear would have killed the yaks, and he would stumble upon the yak, and and then he will say a mantra or something, and then you move on from there. Of course, it's a loss. It's definitely, you feel the economic burden, but there is not the sense of, I want to kill this predator. I think that's not very prevalent, but that is not to say that it won't happen, but right now, that is the case. There is a strong sense of tolerance as well. Yeah.
Over here.
Thank you for your wonderful talk, both of you. I'm wondering whether the Bhutanese people themselves form NGOs to work with the indigenous wildlife.
Yeah, we do have local nonprofits that work primarily in conservation. We have a few, just a small handful, not many. At the same time, we also have community-based, sort of loosely affiliated associations that work in, together with the government or the parks or whoever, in terms of, protecting and working in wildlife conservation as well. So we do have some. Yeah.
Don't you have? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have to take the questions with the microphone, and the microphone's back here. So give us a minute. Go right ahead.
Sorry about that. I really loved what you said about the higher tolerance as far as farmers and predation. In the States, like especially in the Western United States, we do a really poor job, I think, of kind of toggling from having species that we deem endangered to there being growth and then predation, like in Wyoming with wolves, for example, and then we kind of teeter between the two. What do you think it is about the cultural difference, kind of apart from the obvious with the religion and in the association of the tigers in the local religion, that makes us so much worse at it, or you guys so much better at it? Because I think there's so many opportunities for us to learn.
I think you have a lot of guns here.
Sorry, everybody, I know where I am.
No, in the ranches, really, I know of many friends in Montana and other places, people do have a lot of guns. And hunting is a lifestyle, and it's not easy. It's not difficult to switch from whatever you're hunting to a predator, right? So it's happens. But for Bhutan, again, I think Buddhism and spirituality play a big role in it. At the same time, I think there's also a general understanding of the legal implications of things as well. So there's a general awareness that it is illegal to kill a tiger, for instance. You have to pay. You will face consequences. So people are generally law-abiding. And then of course yet another point could be the helplessness. Sometimes we're not really a gun culture, or we're not really we don't have a culture whereby you have some way of retaliating and killing whatever comes at you. I think it's not an instant reaction to kill something. So I think many different factors come into play.
Thank you. I just want to first thank you for both coming here and sharing your story. Is there a clear call to action that this group of people can do to help?
Yes. Well, first, as Rinpoche pointed out, his monastery is 1,200 years old. It's it's fascinating because is probably the only monastery that I know of. I'm sure there are others that I probably don't know about, but that's dedicated to this female, sort of the master that has transformed into this tigress. But it is in a very scary, sort of precarious position right now because it's old. The walls are cracking, the frescoes, and Rinpoche is concerned because in other older monasteries, you find that the murals are painted on canvas and stuck on the walls. But in this particular monastery, it's actually on the walls. So it's that old that even the frescoes and the murals are actually on the walls. And these are cracked, and The timber are all old, so it's a little bit of a challenge. And that's one thing that Rinpoche is trying to do, is also to get the support to restore that, not to rebuild it, but really to conserve and restore it so that the originality of a lot of these can be preserved. So that's one. Secondly, I think in terms of, we're also thinking of a way, new ways of supporting the local authorities, right? Just last year, they started out this human-wildlife conflict schemes with tigers, and particularly in the area where Rinpoche's monasteries are. But I think, again, using the spiritual leaders as the focal point for spearheading these kind of human-wildlife conflict resolution probably can be more effective than only the government doing it, or only the other conservationists doing it. So that's another area where we think a good program that is well thought out, but that brings the community together to help solve these problems, so that they're, whether it is through other economic opportunities, for instance, Rinpoche's, that whole area is a very good green tea production area, that's one economic opportunity there, helping with those, for instance, or helping with other forms of economic opportunities in these areas could be, yeah. Yes, so you can find more information, or at least to get in touch with us. We have Rinpoche's Foundation, the Kedru Foundation, and the Bhutan Foundation, website listed here. Yeah.
Over here.
Thanks for coming. Two quick questions, but first a little background. So around 2006, I led the first ever mountain bike tour completely across Bhutan. And we exited into India, and we flew out of Jawadi. And I've been back. I've led the snowman trek, and I was even there as recently as October, right? And in the beginning, of course, the lateral road, the mother road, was one lane, and now we were there with one tour where they were trying to make it 2 lanes, and it was far more challenging. And then we were there recently in October. I'm going back this coming October with a group. And any motivation to open the second airport in eastern Bhutan to recreation and get more tourism there? And then also, I'm hearing that they're going to increase the tourism tax, which, again, maybe for recreational folks. I mean, we all want to support national health care and education, but we just get a little pushback occasionally for people who want to go there and hike and cycle.
Well, firstly, with your the airports, they are open. The domestic airports in central Bhutan, and the one in eastern Bhutan, and also one in south, they're all open now. So there are flights, but depending on the season, I think sometimes monsoon seasons, usually there are no flights, or when there are not enough passengers, there are no flights. But you can definitely fly from Paro to Pumtang, or to Yonphula, or to Gelifu. So those domestic airports are open. In terms of the tourism, what they call sustainable development fees, there has been an increase. Yeah, that's. I think Bhutan is seriously after COVID. I mean, they're looking at regulating tourism in a way that is controlled and it's not unmanageable. So there is that. But there was a blanket application of this sustainable development fees, regardless of a duration and all. But recently, I believe they're reviewing it, because this is right after COVID. We do need tourists. We do need people to come and visit. I think economic impact, while Bhutan has done very well on the medical and the health response to COVID, but on the economic side, we have taken a beating, right, as many countries have, because of repeated lockdown, the border closures, and so forth. So economically, the country is suffering. So we do need the tourists. But at the same time, this tourism policy did come in place, and I know there is a lot of back and forth at the moment. But I believe the government is reviewing it and trying to look at the duration and try to make concessions as to if the longer you stay, you have waivers and you put in all of these. But the whole idea is to go back to the original policy of low volume, high value tourism.
So I just want to say also that Se Ring is watching from California right now. Okay. So she's on. And we have a comment from Ronaldo in Brazil who says that it's touching to see a philosophy of life that respects nature as a sacred gift. And of course, my phone went out. So we're going to go on to another question. So here we go.
Thank you. So coming back to conversation about wildlife corridors and tigers, a country like Bhutan, where conservation and culture and spirituality are so tied up in each other, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what international conversations for Bhutan is like when obviously tigers don't respect, understand country borders. So when you have a country like Bhutan that, has the support of His Majesty and Her Majesty when it comes to conservation, trying to preserve tigers more expansively than just Bhutan? Are there conversations about wildlife corridors between, Bhutan, Nepal, India, China? And what is it like when you have different cultures all having those conversations about, one species or, one group of species like that?
Thanks, Oakley. I think in response to your question, this map would better explain some of what can be done in the tiger world. Right? International conservation, unfortunately, is often driven by politics, driven by who has the money. It's always the some countries that have a lot of money, and the countries that have the tigers don't always have a lot of the money, but are stuck with dealing with tigers. Right? So for tigers, I think. As some of my colleagues who are actually in the field, doing tiger biology and all that, so we've been talking about this idea of connecting Bhutan with northeastern India and possibly even into Burma. That the habitat is there, right? So Bhutan tigers are there. We know for a fact. In northern India, there's a lot of pressure on the forest in Arunachal Pradesh and all that, but still the habitat is there. The tigers are there in sporadically sparsed out along, and then along on the other side into Burma, the habitat is there. Tigers, we don't know. But this whole complex actually presents such an opportunity if these three countries can come together, if the global conservation community can at least take a look at what this area promises, because we believe that there's enough area to house like half the tiger population of the world that exists right now in this contiguous forested area from Bhutan to northern India to Burma. But again, I don't know if the global tiger conservation community is looking at that. I remember, because I was working in World Wildlife Fund looking after the tiger program, and there was a big focus on what's called the lower Mekong, because there are so many other things happening. But even tigers, we were supposed to look at the lower Mekong. There are no tigers there anymore, So there's a misplacement of some of these conservation dollars or conservation efforts like that, but it's often driven by the information that these organizations have, or the alignment of these countries with their own favorite sort of sites that they have been working on for so long. So I think there is a need to honestly reassess some of that and then go into areas that have these best promises. Yeah.
So again, how many tigers are living in the wild now that you're aware of?
I think it's about 7,000 or something. Wasn't that like the number?
It might even be less than that.
It was 3,200 at one point. Sorry, I was thinking of snow leopards. Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
You are doing an incredible job in what you're doing in conservation. One of our members, Lori Marker, just brought some cheetahs over to India because the cheetahs had gone extinct over there in 1952. So what you're doing is extraordinary, and we'd like to help in every which way we can. There's another question over here.
A typical tourist question. How are the roads in Bhutan, like up to that monastery? Is it possible? I can't bike and hike, but I would love to go. Can you?
Okay, so you can drive. The roads are in a perfect condition right now. You have the Peace Road till let's say only just half a kilometer is just a rough road. But it's still drivable, and then especially in the dry seasons, the roads are perfect. And in monsoon season, sometimes there is a little complications, but otherwise it's all right. Yeah, and if you drive from nearby the airport, which is Bumtang Airport, it is just 2.5 hours drive. So you can just reach any time. Or if you want to just do a bicycling, also you can you can just, drive up. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a very different question. I work in the space industry, education, teaching people what we can do in space and preparing people to go to space. At the same time, it's really important that we not lose touch with nature and Earth and our roots. Are you working at all with anybody else in the space industry in building this alliance to make sure that we understand nature and keep nature with us wherever we go?
Space, I mean, in terms of exploration, the government has some initiatives to look at satellites and, from that perspective, through STEM education, space engineering and all that. NASA is also partnering with some agencies in Bhutan on more on applications, of Earth observation satellites, right? So GIS and satellite maps, imagery, and trying to understand sort of habitat of endangered species, or currently, one of the programs that they're looking at is producing what they call rice maps, masking maps for rice cultivation. And they looked at forest diseases at one point. So there is the space application that is being done, but the exploration itself, I think it's limited. There is some interaction with some satellite launches, like small satellite launches that they're doing together with the Indian Space Organization and all that. Yeah. So there is some of that, and there is an interest. Yeah.
Thank you. So I had a question a little bit going back to the community level when it comes to human-predator conflict. And it was very interesting to me when you were talking about the tolerance levels of, at the community level, if you have livestock loss, how the people that are losing the livestock respond to tigers. I really appreciate the kind of comparison to some of our human-predator conflict in the States, and the role that just having guns to respond, or with retribution, makes a big difference. But at the same time, I'm wondering what you guys are kind of doing, or what different communities are doing to still maintain the tolerance and respond to potential anger or financial stress when you find communities losing a lot of livestock. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe there isn't enough predation to cause that level of stress. But I'm wondering if there is that, you said there isn't necessarily financial compensation. So what are you doing instead?
So, right. So as I mentioned earlier, I think just doling out money alone doesn't solve the problem. I think that we know from many places around the world that's not sustainable. But what the government has done is also put in seed money for livestock insurance, for example. That's a little bit better than just giving out money alone, right? Because there is a little bit of ownership, a little bit of, sort of they can do some verification as to whether it's really predated by a tiger or is something else. So a lot of that, so the government, in some parts of the country, I think they have been trying these livestock insurance. In others, they're looking at providing incentives to maybe improve crop production, maybe protect the crops from other wildlife, like wild pigs and other things, right, with electric fencing and so forth. So there's a lot of effort in other forms. But I can share another example from the snow leopards and up in the mountains, where people were losing a lot of yaks. Up in the mountains, it's yaks, the livestock, but they lose it to predators. So there's a lot of complaints saying, the predation is high, we're losing a lot of yaks. But upon closer investigation, we found out that it's actually they were losing a lot more to disease. It was a tapeworm, sort of a helminth disease that the larva grows into the brain and it kills the animal. So that was treatable or preventable somehow, right? So helping with the veterinary care and working together with the livestock officials, it was so much easier to bring down the loss rather than just looking at compensation or in fact it was more impactful. You're preventing more loss because they were losing a lot more to disease than to predators. So like that, I think the actual investigations into those specific areas probably bring out better ways of dealing with this. Yeah.
Thank
Okay, Fritz, go ahead.
Not that long ago, there were disputes between Nepal and Bhutan. Nepal has a population of 27 million people. Little Bhutan was empty, peaceful, Buddhist. Nepal, 90% Hindu, unemployment about 50%, and people came in from Nepal to settle in Bhutan illegally, and I kept thinking, keep them out, keep them out, keep Bhutan the way it is, the way it was. Has this problem been settled? And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to give a good answer, but I will definitely make an attempt. So yes, in the late 80s, in the early 90s, there was this issue of a lot of economic migrants, coming over from the bordering areas of Nepal and India and all that. A lot of people who had settled in, and then when there was a final verification of citizenship, it was really an immigration problem. So a lot of them have found out not to really be bona fide citizens of Bhutan. So there was a lot of conflict because of that. And in the process, I think refugee camps were set up in Nepal with, of course, education and food and all that. That also attracted a lot of people just looking to get a better life. So then, a lot of people got settled into these refugee camps who claimed to be Bhutanese, but some of them may have been Bhutanese, but all of them were definitely not Bhutanese. So then what the two governments of Nepal and Bhutan, together with UNHCR, did was what they call joint verification to see who were genuine, Bhutanese or not. So there was a series of these verification efforts, and try to find out exactly how many people, need to be repatriated, back to Bhutan or whatever it was. But then, as this was going on, it was quite chaotic. The governance in Nepal was, very unstable at that time. It was changing all the time. There was a lot of revolution, and at the same time, the verification process. It also, they also met with some violence. Rocks were pelted at them, and it was getting a little dangerous. But the UNHCR was involved all along, and then ultimately, because of that, the verification stopped. And just around that time was also when I think the U.S. and many other countries, took in a lot of the so-called refugees from these camps. So a lot of them are now settled, here in the U.S., Australia, and other places. Yeah, but what I must say is, inside Bhutan, there is still a lot of peace and stability. We have friends of Nepali origin, ancestry as ministers, as members of parliament. So it's not like, one group of people look down upon the others or that we don't get along. Nothing like that exists inside Bhutan. So I hope that answers your questions.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for your talk. I was lucky enough to visit in December, and it's Bhutan's a very beautiful country. I had a question about technology. So you mentioned that kind of technological influences from outside can both bring benefits and also bring challenges. I wondered, in the conservation space, how is technology being used, particularly with regards to tigers, whether that's through sensors like camera-based traps or anything, and yeah, just wondered how technology is helping or hindering conservation efforts.
Yeah, we've always been using good, I guess I don't know if I should say cutting edge, but really good technology in doing a lot of these investigations. So a lot of our biologists are very familiar with, of course, with satellite imagery and things like that, but also GPS telemetry, radio telemetry, using satellite collars. Now they're also going into genetics, as well. So there is adoption of these tools that are there. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. The camera traps, obviously, we use a lot of camera traps as well. Yeah.
We have a question from Jenny in Princeton, who says she was paying attention to what you were saying earlier. A recent study is indicating that more and more teenagers are getting depressed by social media. In Bhutan, where life is built around happiness, what aspects of your educational system can help worldwide youth seek well-being outside of social media?
Maybe this is a question appropriate for Rinpoche.
I will also try to attempt. You know what? I cannot guarantee like whether I will be able to really answer this or not. But actually, you know, there is of course the challenges. You know, having a like growth of technologies, and then the problem with the technology is that we are not able to use it skillfully, and we are actually there is no time frame, and then when we realize that you are kind of like half of the night has been just playing with the technologies, and then there is always scrolling, one come after one. Yeah, and the problem, it's not only the problem, but actually that technology is helping us to get things very, very much easier than before, isn't it? If you have to actually buy something else, you can just go to Amazon and just order, and then a couple of weeks after, like you will just get your package. Let's say 100 years ago, like you have to, there should be someone else walking through to reach that. So in that way, it's like technology is actually helping us. But in another way, that technology is as a challenge. And in Bhutan, especially we are trying to, especially the monks and the young monks around my monastery, the thing that which I'm trying to actually educate with the monks is that use the technologies that is necessary for you. I mean, instead of getting carried away by that, and at the same time using the technologies to connect each other, which is useful. And those who actually get very much addicted to the technologies, then teaching some kind of skills how to connect to the nature, and going through the walk, speaking each other, creating the connections personal to personal. That kind of how to say exercise has been implemented, and it is actually quite helpful in a way. And then people are understanding that the technology is getting us divorce from the real connections, isn't it? And then and that's actually very sad in a way in the world, the entire world. There are so many destructive technologies, but I think technology itself is neutral, isn't it? It's up to us, how you use it. If you're using the technologies for your own personal gain, you can actually, that technology can help you become that. But if you're not knowing how you're using the technologies, then the moment that you understand, you're already bullied by the technology. So I think it's totally dependent on us. And Bhutan, I think so far, I would say there is a challenges. At the same time, there are people who are very successful using the technology. So that, yeah.
Also, just to add a little bit on this, the thing about what others can learn about education, I don't think Bhutan has it all figured out. I think it would be it would be beguiling every one of you to say that Bhutan has all the answers. I don't think so. I think we have a lot of challenges. We are still, figuring out the quality of education, the quality of many things. I think economically, I think it's very challenging at the moment, because of COVID and many things. So I wouldn't say that what we have is good and therefore everybody should learn from it. I don't think so. But at the same time, I think there are specifics of certain aspects of Bhutanese way of life that can be applicable. I think I remember talking to some of you and who have spent some time in Bhutan and saying that you've learned a thing or two. So it will depend on your individual perceptions and how you align with what Bhutan has to offer. But that is not to say that Bhutan has it figured out. It takes me back to a funny anecdote, because when this concept of gross national happiness was being very, I think everybody was very amazed with it, and a lot of cities were adopting it. There were gross national happiness, Vermont and Santa Monica, and I don't know, many places, right? So there were a lot of efforts in trying to copy or at least learn from it. And there was one place in Brazil that was using it, in a village or in a community. And I believe there was a group of officials from Bhutan on a study tour visiting that community. And then the people were asking the Bhutanese official, "Oh, are we doing GNH right? Is this how you do gross national happiness?" They don't know. So we haven't figured it out. It's a way of life, for certain aspects of it. I think there's intentional, just striving a balance between the material and the spiritual, and your own well-being and the mental health and all of that. But I don't think we have it all figured out. So.
I mean, given what's going on around the world right now, I think we welcome any type of positive advice from anyone, but especially you. You're doing a great job. Next question.
Hi, I'm getting back to the tigers now, if you don't mind. So I'm just curious. So when I was in Corbett National Park, there was a man-eating tiger in the park, and they said that part of the problem was because humans are encroaching so much on the habitat of animals, and the same with diseases, pandemics and whatever spreading, it's the same problem. So you're in a country which uniquely has preserved this wonderful amount of habitat. Does this mean that you don't have such a problem with man-eating tigers?
Right, so man-eating tigers, luckily not really. I mean, there was one incidence of a tiger attacking a human, but other than that, we haven't really come across any incidents. But that could also be because our human density is very low. We have like maybe 20 people, one person per 20 square kilometers. We are a population of 750,000 people, in a 38,000 square kilometer country. So our population density is very low, thankfully. So we're not like, even in Corbett or many places, you have the tiger reserves, but you also have, villagers with many people, highly dense human population around it. That is not prevalent in Bhutan, luckily. But we do get occasionally tigers coming at the most to predate on livestock. We have had repeat offenders and multiple livestock being killed, especially not far from Rinpoche's monastery. And in one of these areas, it was coming too close to a village. So the authorities, brought in the folks from the Tiger Center, and I'm proud to say that we have a group of trained biologists who can successfully trap tigers repeatedly. And then there are very few groups in the world that can do this. And so anyway, so they were able to trap this particular tiger, put a collar on it to then monitor its movement, so that they can, warn the villagers, saying that, it's coming, it's near this area or far from the village, and so there are instances like that. But man-eating, not so much. Yeah, thankfully.
Thank you for your talk. It's been my dream to go to Bhutan for the past couple of years. I work in data and AI, so I work in technology. So combining both the tigers back with technology, I've recently gotten to know the conservation space, and specifically in Zimbabwe, tracking rhinos, black rhinos in particular. And I'm just curious to learn about how Bhutan is embracing technology through the lens of tracking the wellness of tigers. How do you track progress is being made on increasing the population of tigers? And if you work with any partnerships, going back to the question of how can we get involved and help increase population?
Yeah. So Bhutan has been using camera traps for a long time now. So I think our tiger biologists, they're pretty proficient in the use, not only the use, but also analysis, sophisticated analysis of the data that come from there, right? So they have been doing that. The camera, sensing technology is improving by the day, and getting cheaper and all of that. So that's definitely. But if there's any other automated way of doing that, definitely. I mean, I'm sure they would love to look at. I know there are camera traps that will send you the photos on your phone. That's been there for a while. It's just the cost is a factor. But yeah, any sort of a new ways of detecting. I mean, people talk about very high resolution satellite imagery that can zoom down and get a swath of land that at very fine resolution to discern specific animals there. But I haven't really seen good application of that. But certainly there's a lot of possibilities, and I'm sure our colleagues on the ground would love to talk to you about what else is out there. So yeah.
I want to thank you guys so much for coming tonight and introducing us to the amazing country Bhutan and to all the amazing achievements. We are living so far away here in New York City, and to see you guys, thank you so much, making it all the way to our city here. And I want to thank everybody in the room here conserving wildlife. I've been just sitting here and I'm looking at this map from 2016, and when you go on the internet, there's this one number that always comes up. 2014, 2015, there were 103 tigers. There were 103 tigers in Bhutan. And then the next thing you read that Bhutan can only have like 130 to 150 tigers that they can actually sustain. I think right now in the world we have 4,500 tigers, right? How many, and I think you guys are not counting tigers actually. Do we have any number? Do we have any idea? That would be so interesting. And thanks again for all the effort.
We do. So that that number in 103 or 100, that was from the last survey. The most recent has just been completed, and the report is just about to be launched. We hear a lot of good news. There's an increase, but I don't think I'm allowed to say anything yet because the report is not officially out. I'm sure it'll be launched in a big way, but it's all good. It's all very positive, and I think there's a significant increase in the number of tigers. But
limited of number that Bhutan can, as you said, sustain?
Well, it usually, it's hard to say limit, but it will be bounded by prey and space and many other things. But for Bhutan, the prey base is pretty good, but the country is very rugged, right? So sometimes you think of tigers as having large home ranges, and which is true in many cases. But in places like Bhutan, where you have prey density is pretty good, the home ranges are surprisingly, well, understandably, I guess, expectedly not that large also, which would mean that you can hold more. So it depends on where you are, but I don't think we are at that stage where you say, too many tigers. I don't think we're quite there yet. But like you said, for a portion of that global population, I think Bhutan is a significant, not just in the numbers, but the quality in the sense that threats very low. And I remember talking to many colleagues saying that Bhutan is like the heart that's pumping out tigers, that could pump out tigers into the landscape. And again, Bhutan and India and eastern both on the eastern, western areas, there are contiguous forests in some of these places where these spaces are much bigger and they can also sustain more tigers, as long as there are tigers.
Thank you for speaking to us today. Still on the topic of tigers, but from a different angle. I know it just ended the Year of the Tiger, so I was wondering if you can talk a bit about that. Is that year any special? Like I know in China I read there's a spike in the birth rates because people want to give birth in the Year of the Tiger. So is it like anything special? Are there any special celebrations? Thank you.
I think that is still believed very much in Bhutan and like in Tibet and actually in the Himalayan countries, especially those who believes in, like astrology, So the people who are born in the tiger years are supposed to be like very good luck in a family, and another way of taking is like saying I'm like interpreting about the tiger is like. They could be a good leader. That's what the astrology is interpreting. But there is no actually as such significant. I could actually really say it. But when we actually deal with these people, like this is a joke, but they're a little bit bully. But that's sometimes they are good bully. So I mean, in that there is a belief, like especially in the Bhutanese society, like like now I don't know, not today, but our parents' time, like even if your medicines fed by the person like who is born in tiger's year, it makes a good effect on your body. So there is kind of certain beliefs like that. They are still like living, very very much and strongly alive in people's mind right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Because my wife is born in the Year of the Tiger. She's not a bully, but she's a strong woman. So.
Hi, thank you. I guess I want to make an observation, have a note of thanks, and then a question for each of you. I just would observe, first of all, this really unique discussion between conservation and spirituality. I think a lot of that is lost in what we have in North America in particular, even though we may have a lot of indigenous knowledge. This linkage is extremely unique, and I want to thank the two of you for being here to share that with us. I wish there was more of it in the world. And also thank you because I was able to witness that firsthand in 2009 during the solar eclipse in the mountains of Bhutan, and how the animals and communities really came together to appreciate each other, and it was just a beautiful moment. So my first question is about water management and tigers. I mean, obviously you had a construction of a new dam in recent years. Maybe there's obviously some substantial effects from climate change. How is that shifting the tiger population? And then my last question would be, are there any modern day stories about tigers in Buddhism? Because recognizing that obviously if you're reincarnated as a Buddhist as an animal, it's not super favorable, but how might we appreciate a modern day story with the tiger spirit? Yeah.
Okay, so you know, in Buddhism, the most important part is here actually, you know, there is two most important thing, which is wisdom and compassion. So when you talk about the tiger, we are talking about the fearless wisdom. You know, we are talking about the wisdom aspect itself, and which is very much important. And the Monmutashi Hidden transformation into the tigers represents the fearless wisdom. And then, you know, that is something that which is actually strongly living in each and every one of us, actually. And then only the thing is that we actually really need to understand that. And you know what, one another most important thing is that in Buddhism, like, you know, everyone carries that the Buddha nature, or we call it the mind. We have a consciousness. And when you are able to understand the true nature of the consciousness, you are a Buddha. So that, what is that true nature means by, and that is actually, you know, it is described through two different qualities, which are wisdom and compassion. And that wisdom, if you're talking about that, you know, the Monmutashi Hidden, like the fearless wisdom, we still need that in order to become a Buddha. So that is still like, you know, a modern, that they haven't changed from like 8th century to today, it's still living. There is a slightly different way of like practicing, enhancing that wisdom in ourselves, but there may be like different styles, but actually the wisdom is the same wisdom that we're actually enhancing. And the another thing is that, you know, so when you talk about the you know, like the what was So yeah, so I think that the fearless wisdom is something that is very important, and I think today, in today's world, we actually really need more, isn't it? We actually really need more. What does mean by fearless wisdom means by our mind, the quality of the mind is actually that's very present at this moment. Every one of us, actually, we all actually struggle. We all suffer. Why do we suffer? It's maybe like the fundamental reason why we are suffering is because we have this emotional that is governing our mind, and therefore we have a fear, we have an anger. You know, the reason behind the anger could be like, you know, big fear. You know, we have an attachment, we have an ego. So these are all kind of things that is dominating our true nature of mind. So we really need a powerful, you know, wisdoms to dominate those emotional minds, or kind of transform those emotional minds. So fearless wisdom is actually very much important. You know, like that is more powerful, that in order to transform those emotional, you know, like into the emotions, into the wisdom, you know, so that you could see the things that you're supposed to see, so that you can understand the things you're supposed to understand, you know, that you can understand the true nature of yourself. And right now, like, we're actually looking into the, you know, things through the fabricated lens, which is, you know, fabricated through with your emotions, and you're looking into the things through the emotions, so that you see someone else your friend, or you see someone else as your enemy. It's not equal for you. You know, that's, you know, like you're looking through the lens of the one through an attachment as a beloved person, isn't it? And you're looking one through a kind of like lens of hatred, or kind of like, you know, a kind of anger, that you don't see that person as your friend. Rather you see that person as an enemy. And that is kind of where your emotional minds are dominating your true essence of your mind. So fearless wisdom is something else to wake up from that things, awakening mind. That is the fearless wisdom. So we really need that in today's world, especially 21st century, everywhere, where, like, you know, in the world, like, now, after, you know, we experienced it, and during the COVID time, like, you know, people, hundreds and thousands of people have struggled from depressions, not getting to meet your friends, isn't that? And, like, you know, we really need that kind of things, you know, to remind us ourselves. And there are we humans have this great capacities in ourselves to transform yourself and to transform the rest of the world as well. Yeah. Did I answer you?
Yep. And then to answer the second part of your question about water, climate change, and tigers, I wouldn't say directly, but of course, obviously with Bhutan, although we are carbon negative, although we don't emit as much as we sequester, but regardless, we fear the brunt. I mean, we face the brunt of climate change because we're in a very fragile, ecologically fragile part of the world, in the Himalayas, eastern Himalayas, where we get high precipitation. Now, increasingly, we get erratic weather patterns, as we're getting everywhere else in the world. But water sources in some parts of the country have dried up, and people are looking into that. Hydropower and water sources, I think our hydropower schemes are a little different. These are what they call run-of-the-river schemes. So they're deeper in the valleys, and we don't have too much inundation, like not large dams and then backflow and covering villages, and it's not at that scale. But still, it does impact, I think, our ecosystems and the river, especially the riverine ecosystem, a lot of which we don't fully understand. But water sources for tigers, in some of these communities, what we had done in the past is support spiritual sort of Buddhist institutions taking the charge in widening or deepening these water ponds, what we call water holes, like recharge ponds, so that they can collect more rainwater. There's better recharge of the groundwater, and that positively affects the flow of water downstream into the villages. And that we have had good success with this in one particular community in south central Bhutan.
Okay, just before we end, we have 2 more questions coming. But I'm standing next to someone by the name of Henry. We do have tigers in New York, or we did until recently. We have a number of them at the Bronx Zoo. But Henry, do you want to just tell everybody what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So this is somewhat unrelated, but there was a tiger kept in an apartment in New York City in 2003. Some of you may or may not remember the story. It was all over the news back then. And the tiger was kept as a cub. It was in, I'm sorry? It was in Harlem, yeah, in a housing project. And it was kept by somebody who illegally acquired the cub. And so anyway, yeah, I'm doing a story and a photo book about that particular tiger who passed away recently. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I had one other question. Since the corridor between India and Nepal and Bhutan has been, for lack of a better word, obliterated for the Bengal tiger, are there trading programs between these nations, in a sense, to keep the genetics viable?
There is a lot of interaction. I don't know there is genetic, in some parts of India and Bhutan, we still have contiguous forests. And tiger, actually, there are Manas National Park is a good example. We have the Royal Manas National Park on Bhutan, which abuts Manas Tiger Reserve and Manas National Park on the Indian side. So there the tigers go back and forth. So in fact we joke around and say the kitchen is here, but the bedroom is kind of in Bhutan. So we joke around like that. But from radio telemetry studies, I think our colleagues have found out a lot of movement back and forth. So that exists. With Bhutan, with Nepal, sorry, it's a little disjointed. It's quite far away. Historically, I'm sure the forest cover might have been contiguous. But they're all the same. They're all Bengal tigers, in these particular areas. But there are exchanges, but I don't think they have exchanged genetic materials. I don't think we are that far down the road of isolation and extinction. Yeah.
Many of you in the audience were asking, what can we do to help? And one of the things that we can do is communicate with each other and share our research and data, and also collaborate. And I just wanted Nancy to tell you what she's doing this week for the tiger.
Yes, I'm having. I'm very involved with Sierra Photo New York City. It's a subgroup of the National Sierra Club, and I'm a speaker coordinator. And this Wednesday we're having a person that, believe it or not, I was in India, Bandagar. I can't pronounce it. Do you know how to pronounce it? National Park last March on a tiger trip, and believe it or not, on a neighboring jeep. We ride around in open jeeps on the road, looking for, when you spot a tiger and you have to wait for one. It was 105 degrees Fahrenheit. It was hot, resting. But I met someone on a neighboring jeep who is going to be presenting. I mean, he is a naturalist, is an amazing speaker. If anybody's interested in getting a Zoom link, I can invite you to, but it's a Zoom session. And
that's for all our tiger lovers out here. And here's one more question here.
Yes, well, thanks for coming. It's an honor that you're here. My question is related to historically, traditionally, what type of things do people do to prevent tiger livestock interaction? I run a project in Mongolia, conservation of snow leopard and wolf, and what I found is that we revitalized the use of the livestock guardian dog that historically was used in Mongolia, a big fierce dog that was kind of lost during the socialist era. And so we're bringing it back, and that's working with communities, working with elders, working with you know, everybody around, kind of coring up. What type of things exist or existed that you can take advantage of, or are you finding that you are utilizing even better than in the past?
With the I think the guard dogs in Bhutan is more prevalent up in the mountains with vis-a-vis snow leopards and yaks, right? So they're up above a certain elevation, then people tend, their livestock is usually yak, and they move around in these herders camps over the summer, and in the winter they come closer to the village, but they would always have a Tibetan, like a mastiff or a big dog that would stand guard at, you know, around the camp at night. Other than that, there's not a whole lot going on. For livestock, it's again, you know, in the villages, usually, you know, there are some parts of the communities that move back and forth. So there is some kind of a migration with larger herds, you know, belonging to richer families or belonging to traditionally landed families that have a lot of cattle, you know. So they would have some way of protecting their livestock. But for the most part, I think the use of guard dogs is not really prevalent in the lower sort of areas. The livestock are wandering off. Once they're done with the fields, maybe the bulls are out in the forest, they're feeding, and if you're unlucky, then, you know, you get a tiger will attack your livestock. So there hasn't been much change in the livestock husbandry practice by way of protection, but predation existed. I mean, livestock predation existed for centuries, you know. So it's always been there, always been a part of life. So it's not like something new that has just happened. It's just that lately, in the last 15, 20 years, there's this awareness that, oh, something must be done, or something, you know, maybe somebody should give us money, or somebody should compensate or do something. I think that awareness is more, it's increased. But by way of protecting, I don't think there's anything new that is being done. Yeah. I mean, I take it back a little bit, you know, because in recent years, people have tried with sirens and little tinkering with little, you know, electronic gadgets and things like that. So that have worked to some extent. In other parts, they've tried with stuffed tigers and, you know, things like that, you know, but, you know, only to a certain extent successful, yeah.
To add on it, actually, you know, the Bhutanese people actually believe in, like, spirits, you know, very much, and the tigers kind of like attracting this, the kind of livestock is believed, as someone mentioned, that, you know, or the local deities is not happy with it. And so there is kind of like so many things that affiliated with the local shamans, and actually they kind of like do kind of so many kind of, I don't know, pleasing ceremony, or so kind of like, you know, cleansing pujas and so on and so forth, so to prevent the tigers attack actually. And then like somehow, you know, when their beliefs functions, it actually helps them to actually, you know, get away from all those kind of, you know, attacks, I think. So that was I think what the ancient time they used to believe in, and I think it's still going on right now, I think.
That's a good point and good addition, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I think spiritually, you know, because you believe that, as Rinpoche said, you know, when sometimes people believe that when your guardian deities are not happy, then you lose your tigers. Therefore, you make them happy, you know. Therefore, that is the protection. I guess the spiritual part of it, which is totally not my world, but, you know, I think I'm really glad that Rinpoche interjected with that addition, yeah.
One of the problems of conservation of animals world over is poaching. I want to know what is the extent of poaching in Bhutan, what measures you're taking to restrict it, and connected with that, is the number of tigers that you have increasing or decreasing?
So your last question first, I think the number of tigers have increased since the last survey, which was done in 2014-15. The most recent was finished in 2021. So numbers have increased, from these surveys. So they are increasing, but poaching does exist. I wouldn't say that poaching is totally absent. In some of the neighboring areas, especially, we have villages in India, and then they collude with some villagers on the Bhutan side. So there is some illegal sort of movement back and forth, and they bring in these kadu, we call them kadua, I think they call them kadua, the handmade, the traditional guns, or not very sophisticated, but so they use these, and so there have been some activity in some of these bordering areas, but the Tiger Center, together with this one religious community, we supported that. The foundation supported it. Is a program called the Hunter to Hermit program, and it was really working with a lot of the older people who were previously engaged in these kind of illegal activities. So then the Buddhist master comes into the picture and intervenes and encourages them to live a life of prayer and repent. They repent their actions, and it's pretty successful. It's called a Hunter to Hermit program, and a lot of older people who were previously engaged in these, not necessarily just tigers, but other illegal wildlife, smaller animals, and just killing and all that. So they have really turned over, into a different lifestyle. They don't do that anymore. They live a life of prayer near the monastery, but they also realize that they would much rather be with their children and grandchildren and not in prison. And but also I think economic opportunities, giving them economic opportunities to improve their livelihoods. I think those are all part of that program too. So it does exist, yeah.
So finally, Jenny is still watching online, and she was asking, first of all, she's enjoying this tremendously, and thanks you both very much. Could you speak about the Tagmoy, excuse the pronunciation here, Tagmoy Lujin Gi Dok prayer at the monasteries for the tiger and Ajatak, or Uncle Tiger? Could you please close with a few lines of the prayer in your native tongue for tigers of the world?
What was that? Sorry?
Okay. She's asking about the Tagmoy Lujin Gidak prayer at the monasteries for the tiger and Ajatak, or Uncle Tiger. And she's asking you whether you could close with a prayer for the tigers in your own native language.
Can I take a look at that? But I don't know what that is, actually.
Let's take a look at what it is.
Oh, I'm very sorry today. I didn't prepare that. Well, anyways, I would definitely love to offer the prayers for the long life of the tigers, and to remain it to another kind of like centuries from now, and so that our younger generations have access to the tiger as well. Yeah, maybe I could do that.
That would be
Instead
wonderful.
of Tamilujin Gedo, that is a big kind of sutra, but we could do it in the monastery. Yeah.
Well, maybe you can do an abridged version.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Should we just do it right now?
Sure, do it right now, because it's gone on for a while, and
Okay.
we'd love for you to close that way.
So let us all kind of pray together, right? Yeah, let's join together, and then let's pray for the tigers. Chigden dejing lolek dan runam peshing chupewa kelek thamje juene yella deba control selo joto jin tenja to badan sering neme degi pansumso tekba chola ngebra jungwa de tashi dejan tengder dele sho.
Thank you. This has been a terrific evening. We can't thank you enough for coming here and sharing it with us. Thank you to a terrific audience as well. And good night, everyone.